Welcome to Quarantine Creatives. I'm Heath Racela. So I'm really excited. I got a good one today. Ginger Z is on the show. Ginger's the chief meteorologist over at ABC. You probably know her most from Good Morning America, although she also does stuff with World News Tonight and kind of all across ABC News. She also has a show, Hearts of Heroes, that airs Saturdays on ABC, part of Litton's Weekend Adventure. It's a show that looks at natural disasters and the men and women who rescue victims and restore their lives. So she's busy. She was on Dancing with the Stars a few years ago. She's written several books. Her memoir is Natural Disaster. I covered them. I am one. And she's working on a follow-up to that right now. She also has a young adult series called Chasing Helicity. So there's a lot of ground to cover. And, I was thinking back, Ginger's actually one of the people that initially inspired this podcast. I've been following her on Twitter forever, and she's a very active tweeter. And she's been reporting from home for the last several months. ABC actually set up a home studio for her with like a big LED wall and a nice professional camera. And she's been doing her weather reports from her basement with this LED wall. And I remember when that first went in, seeing her tweets about it and just thinking, that's really cool. And really wondering sort of how it all worked. And just thinking about how many people does it take to run that? Did they set this up so that it's one button and Ginger just presses the go live button and it all works? Or were there parts of it that she had to fiddle with? Was she taking white balances every day and, having to set focus and things like that? I didn't know any of that stuff and was really curious. And we don't get too deep into that here, but I was really curious when her home studio setup went in, how it all worked. And I had the same curiosity with all the shows that were continuing to broadcast despite the shutdown. Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon, The View. There were just a lot of shows in that kind of, late April, early May time period that it seemed like we're figuring it out. And I wanted to know sort of how it all worked. So flash forward now, 2 months into the show. And obviously the format of the show has changed a lot. We're not talking nitty gritty technical as much as just sort of how the pandemic is making us feel and also what drives us all as creatives in the entertainment and media industry. So it's interesting just sort of to come full circle and think back on some of those early tweets of Ginger's from a few months ago and how they motivated me to want to start this show in the first place. And Ginger is also somebody that I felt for a long time that I would relate to really well if we ever talked. And I mean, this is like going back like 5 or 6 years, just sort of, following her on Twitter and stuff and realizing that there's a lot of weird ways where our worlds didn't quite intersect, but there were weird parallels of just, she grew up in Michigan, I grew up in Ohio, and there's a very specific kind of Great Lakes person that comes from that part of the country that is very different from the rest of the Midwest or the rest of the U.S. So there was always sort of that. And then there's the Disney connection. She grew up going to the Disney parks. I love the Disney parks. And we got to talk a little bit about some of that stuff today, too. She's sort of become, one of the people that ABC sends to big openings like Star Wars Land and Toy Story Land. And I think she went to the World of Avatar. And, just anytime there's sort of a big thing to promote, Ginger and Robin Roberts are two of the people that they send most readily, it seems. One thing we didn't talk about that I wish we had had time for was sort of her renovation background. She actually did a series with her husband, Ben, on DIY Network a few years ago of them renovating their own house. And, I worked at this old house for 15 years, so that was on my radar as just looking at what other networks were doing in the home improvement space and realizing that, DIY had this really interesting show with Ginger and Ben. So we didn't get a chance to talk too much about renovations. And I've been weirdly fascinated always with morning shows. I read Brian Stelter's book, I think it's called Top of the Morning, and it's partially what inspired the morning show, the show on Apple TV Plus. But it was sort of about the horse race between the Today Show and Good Morning America at the time when Good Morning America overtook the Today Show as number one in the ratings. And I talk about it a little bit with Ginger here too, but I grew up with the Today Show just kind of always on as background noise growing up. My mom loved that show, and it was a place, like when I was in New York, I would try to go there and be in the crowd. I've produced a number of segments now for the Today Show from my time at this old house when we had our house on the Today Show. I would prop those. I would write those. I would get the props down to New York and help execute them on the day. So I don't know. I've always enjoyed morning TV for some reason. So it was great to talk to Ginger. I really enjoyed it. Here is my conversation with Ginger Z. So let's just start by sort of talking about how the last 4 months have treated you.
Is it only 4 months? It feels like much longer.
I know. Well, it's mid-July, right? And we started in March. So
yeah. No, I actually thought about that because we got a puppy. We adopted a puppy the weekend before the world shut down.
Yep.
So kind of like, 2 weekends before the world shut down. So I was trying to think the other day of how old he was. And for some reason, I'm like, oh, definitely over a year now. And then I was like, nope, not yet. I guess we didn't make it. So on a personal level, it has been life-changing in so many ways. Obviously with so many unknowns, it's a very stressful and anxious time that way, just even for knowing if we'll have a job, if knowing like the rest of the world.
Sure.
But also because I've suddenly turned into someone who's at home. I've never been anywhere this long in my whole life. I've never been with my husband this much. And I've definitely never had this time with my children. So finding all these beautiful parts and finding that I can be in one place and be okay, because I thought part of me was always running. My entire life has been about traveling and exploring and storm chasing. And to actually be settled in one place for a couple of months is both terrifying and the most exciting and best part ever.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I have a 7 and 4-year-old, and it's the same. I logged into my my JetBlue account the other day just to sort of check. Usually I'm like obsessive with like how close I am to getting to mosaic status, and like I have one flight from February, and that's it for the year, and I'm just like, oh, I guess that's the new normal.
No, it is hard not to look and be like, Diamond, right? Diamond?
Yeah.
Because I'm a Delta.
Right.
But we fly everything because we don't really do, we don't get specific airlines. We fly all of them when we fly for work. So, and then like, that's the thing is on a personal side, it's been such a learning curve. On a work side, the first 6 weeks, I'd say were probably the roughest just because it was done in my basement. I was everything, meaning that something or 6 things would go wrong every single morning, and so it was extra stressful to try to do all those things. And then they set up like a real legit studio, and that's been a lot easier. There's still technical things that happen. My batteries will get low and people will freak out because it's 10 seconds before I go on, but I usually get them changed in time. And
yeah,
I think I've gotten, I used to always do everything myself back in 4 different markets before this. So it's just kind of been a return to that.
Right.
But it does make me incredibly grateful, of course, for all the people that help us usually at ABC News.
Yeah. So talk to me about the home studio setup a little bit. You mentioned it there. Like, so the first 6 weeks, like, is that a different setup than what you have now?
Oh, yeah. So that was just the kind of what everybody's usually working on. It was like a live view, like an app that allows you to broadcast using a microphone, but with one light or a couple of lights. And I had a camera after a while, but the camera almost wasn't as good as the phone. And then all within those first, maybe it was 6 to 8 weeks, where it was just kind of the regular way that people are broadcasting, and if I had anything, because I don't use a teleprompter for weather because I'm a meteorologist, so I just talk about, thankfully, I don't really need it. But there are times where I do things that are sales related or whatever, and I need to get like on point to the words. So I didn't ever have a prompter, and I thought maybe that should change, especially for big, important things. And just for the look of it, they said, let's come in and see what we can do. And they built a full LED screen in my basement with a real camera, real return, real everything. And like the microphone's wireless and just good stuff, like it makes you feel a lot more like you're in a studio. So that's been so helpful. And once that went in and I started, getting used to doing GMA from there, I realized this has the potential to do all of the things that I wanted to do, but always had to like book studio time or whatever for ABC News Live, for a lot of the other projects. Like I'm working on a new climate and environmental weekly roundup. And I just pitched it. I said, guys, I can do it right here. And I can do it with a producer who I work with for all of my graphics. It's going to rock, like we can do so much now that now that I have unlimited access to my very own studio. So in that way, it's been really liberating.
And in terms of sort of like just the graphics appearing behind you and stuff, is that all still fed out of a control room?
So that comes from Max Galumbo, who's a meteorologist as well. Him and I work together for now, almost a decade. And he is in studio. The videos are cut by Samantha, who's also a meteorologist. She works from home. So her and I are home, but he's in the studio. He has to do live graphics that go to me, they have to be in the studio.
Gotcha.
To have it taped to do it. Otherwise, Melissa, who does the evening thing that does the ABC News Live show with me now, she has been able to do it from home. So there's ways to do it from home, but yeah, we've got at least one person usually there.
Gotcha. I want to back up for a minute too and just sort of talk about like when everything started hitting the fan and like we all sort of collectively realized that we were in trouble, I think. Like, do you remember sort of your last days in Times Square? Like what were those days like?
Yeah, well, mine were cut short even before other people were, because that weekend before, the weekend we got Brando, the dog, when we went to North Shore, our son, our 2-year-old, had woken up and he had thrown up, which he'd never done in his life, and he had diarrhea later in the day, and I was like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know what this is, but like a stomach thing. And he seemed okay through the rest of the weekend. He still had like a little stomach stuff, but we just kind of left it off as that. So I went back to work that Monday, Tuesday, and then I think it was Thursday, my 4-year-old got a headache and a fever. And I was like, that's weird. I'm not going to go to work because that's 2 kids sick, and like it makes no sense for me to, whatever it is they have, even though everybody's starting to seemingly come down with this thing called the coronavirus in New York. So I didn't go to work that Friday. And then by Monday, I was working from the basement because everybody was starting to think about doing that. And by that Thursday, I got sick.
Oh, wow.
And our nanny was incredibly sick. And my husband was sick. And so for 3 weeks, we had coronavirus. And so it was like living in the reality that everybody else was. But the very strange part is we were part of the group that couldn't get a test. You know how they were just not possible, and you could wait at 4:30 in the morning in New Jersey and you still wouldn't get one or whatever. So I just kept plugging Tylenol and hoping that I'd wake up and, feel better the next day. But there were definitely ebbs and flows, and like all of our symptoms matched. And then once the antibody tests were available, we got those and we were all positive. So we definitely had it.
Yeah. How long did it last?
It was 3 weeks. I would say there were definitely points within it that were easier than others, and a lot of people talk about this with the coronavirus. I thought I was better. There were a couple of mornings where I'm like, I feel good. I can almost go Tylenol free. And then it would hit me like in the afternoon, it would come down and like my toes to my shoulders would hurt. Like for me, the body aches and the headaches were the worst.
Yeah.
And it was just this, reality hit that no, it's not over. And this thing stays in you for a while. So we were very fortunate that we didn't have to go to the hospital, that we didn't have respiratory, concerns so bad. But I wouldn't say it was fun.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, now that you're mentioning it, I kind of remember seeing this on Twitter like a couple months ago, but I completely forgot about that. Wow, that's wild.
Well, yeah, because it was, it was weird because we were even before George and Allie got it. We were too early, like when nobody even knew what was going on. So we were really, the other reason we knew while we had it is 2 of my son's teachers tested positive. So that weekend, after I had not gone to work that Friday, we got a note on Sunday saying there's not only not school, but we just want to inform you that 2 of our teachers tested positive.
Wow.
One of them had been in the hospital. It was, so we were like, whoa. And then when we all were getting sick, we were like, yep. Our 2-year-old high-fives every teacher every morning. So that would make sense.
Right. Well, we didn't know back then. I mean, that was, I feel like that last week they were kind of like, stop shaking hands if you can do that. But like otherwise, And I'm like, my daughter's in 1st grade and they greet the teacher every morning by shaking hands. And I remember dropping her off like maybe that Wednesday or Thursday, and the teacher started doing like elbow bumps for the first time. And I was like, okay, that's different. But like no one knew that early. It's crazy.
No. So once we had that confirmation, that was the other part, is that mentally what that does to you, to not really know, but to think you do, but not really know, I'd say that was hard because and then on top of not feeling well. And I kept wondering, why am I so exhausted that first week that I didn't really know what was going on? And I feel like I can't get anything done. Maybe it's because working in my basement sucks, you know?
Right.
And then I realized, no, it doesn't. After I got healthy, I'm like, I can make this work. This is great. So, I think it even impacted my mood, which I've seen a lot of people say too. But so things have been so much better since, and now it's just more, where do we go next?
Right.
Like the rest of the world, and how long? And I think that's describing every morning to my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old why, the park isn't always where we can go, and that has been probably the most confusing for them because they just don't get it, nor do they ever know anything different. So I guess either this becomes their normal or it doesn't. We'll see.
It's weird. My 4-year-old has some awareness of it. Like he talks about, not wanting to get corona and sort of knowing the word corona, but that's about it. Like he's always like, can we go to stores now? We're like, no, not really. I think you should stay home.
Well, that, what's so funny is the 4-year-old knows that because that was his first headache he'd ever had. We'd never had him have a headache. And
Yeah.
so he remembers that part, and
Right.
he knows he had a that day, but his was short. He had a couple of days of being sick, and then he was done. He was healthy. But what we found out later is that our 2-year-old is really the one that was first, because it shows up in young kids as GI. And we had no idea that was diarrhea and vomit were like how a lot of kids present. And his was so bad. What was different was his was so acidic. This is probably not for everybody wants to hear, but this is what should have told me that something else was wrong. His bottom and his genitalia got burned from the diarrhea. That's how serious the stuff was. And so he, being a 2-year-old and having all boys around, he thinks it's so funny because he called it penis burn because we had to go. And so whenever somebody says coronavirus, he'll go, yeah, penis burn. And I'm like, you know what? That is the unknown symptom of the world, is penis burn. So
that's, I hadn't even heard that, but I guess, if that's wild.
Yeah.
I want to talk sort of just thinking about coronavirus, and also, you mentioned some of the climate change activism that you do. I feel like those two worlds are kind of intersecting now with this sort of anti-science notion in the country right now. Like, for all the work you've done on climate change for a long time, like, how do you help people? How do you change people's minds? How do you get them to listen to science?
Well, that's the thing, is I think we, as meteorologists and any climatologists, would have an advanced study of this, the psychology of why people don't believe in science, because we've been seeing it for decades. I always find that I have the best time to describe it when I take it down to a local level, when I find a study that's specific to their area. For example, I studied boundary layer meteorology in college. We studied one of the 1980 Plainfield tornado, Plainfield, Illinois. And I would be able to, when I worked in Chicago, I'd be able to talk to people about when you add a lot of asphalt and a lot of pavement where once wild grasses were, you've changed the moisture content and the heat of the surface.
Sure.
There was a study that showed the dramatic difference in how storms moved in relationship to Plainfield because of the change of our surface of our Earth that humans did. So I usually start with something that's very obvious and that nobody can say that's not true, right? And then I say, now, if you take that, like on a micro scale, and you start making it larger and larger and larger, there is no way that we have not influenced what our atmosphere and what our planet is doing.
Right.
And so that just doesn't make sense. So I think that's when it starts to click a bit. And if that still doesn't work, I think what I usually have found great success in is my show Food Forecast was taking something that people adore, like maple syrup in New England, and then talking to a 7th generation sugarer that can not only tell you that within his time, his family's time, because of all the logs and the diaries and the records, using history and a product that people really like to show that agricultural change is huge. People trust farmers,
Yeah.
Like they're going to say, yeah, that means something, that the amount they get, the seasons are shifting. Nobody will fight that either. And so then when you take that from the micro of New England up to a macro, I think it starts to make more sense. So that's usually what I guess that would be advice, is saying, take it down to right in their neighborhood, because that's all people care about. They don't see the macro, and that's too big for them, and it's too scary.
Yeah.
And so the psychology, I've talked to my therapist a lot about this. If you're worried about paying your bills by the end of the month and paying your rent, that you don't have time to worry that the whole world is warming at an accelerated rate.
Right.
That's too much.
Sure.
Yeah. If a tornado has a better shot at hitting you because you've changed, pavement from wild grasses, we start to care a little bit more, and we start feeling that it's so. Maybe that's a model of going into coronavirus that starts to make it more local, more relevant to somebody's life, and then the science isn't even really science; it's obvious.
Right.
It is just. It's just fact, in your face fact, and here's how it's worked, and here's how it didn't work. And so I think that's, I guess, the thing that I've learned over time.
But it's presenting that data and getting people to react based on that. I wonder, talking about just sort of those grassroots actions that people can do. I'm thinking more so in the climate change front here of, as you say, just replacing a driveway with, something more permeable or something like that. What are the things that resonate with people that move them to action and that can make a difference on a small scale?
That's the thing, is I just did this, It's Not Too Late, my new segment on ABC News Live. I just did one on COVID waste, and it got people really fired up, because it kind of comes at that cross section or that intersection of perhaps people that don't believe the science of masks. They're like, why would you have a mask anyway? Definitely don't want to see you literate. And there's not one plastic in the ocean denier. We don't have those.
It's there. Yeah, you see.
It's there. So you start with an environmental impact that people cannot refute. And then what can we do about it? And that's when it gets exciting. So like I did that story. And then I have found this last year, I found these little strips that are tiny, and they come in one envelope for 32 washes with laundry detergent in a strip instead of a giant bottle of plastic that you have. That really, those plastics are often the ones that then become microplastics in the ocean. So it's not necessarily, I guess it's activism, because I have 1 million followers on Instagram. I post it. I say, hey, this has worked for me. I'm not promoting. I bought these things myself. Nobody paid me to do this, but I didn't know about them until a year ago. I'd like to make sure you all know about them. So like making simple changes that still work. My clothes are clean. They smell fine. They can do lots of things to alter that. But you think of just in the last year what my family has saved in giant plastic laundry detergent. And yeah, that's grassroots. But every single bottle not only requires that some of the big labels start to think about finding this other way of doing things, but also just reduces the amount of pollution that we have. So it's like those tangible things that are right in front of us that are not as obvious, because like people know that lights equal coal burning equals greenhouse gas emission. I think that's pretty clear at this point. And I know that they want to save money, and so they know how to do that, and they know LEDs, and like that stuff's been around for too long. But it's like the new stuff that I think that I keep highlighting on a personal level only helps and gets me excited, because I love learning about new stuff. I mean, I haven't used regular cellophane in forever because I have these beeswax covers that work just well or better.
Those are great. Yeah, we have a couple of those too. We love those.
Yeah, there's just ways to do it. And I think I'm like the non-fun mom. I'm like, we don't need balloons. There's lots of other ways to celebrate.
Yeah.
There's lots of things. I'm a Debbie Downer at a party, like, ew, balloons.
But there is something too to just kind of to normalizing that, and as you say, like if you can get it out in front of your fans and more people demand that, even if it's just a simple change like laundry detergent, the industry then starts taking notice, right? And they say, oh, maybe we need to manufacture more of that. People are buying more of that. There's more demand for it. I want to back up for a second too and just ask a little more about GMA, because I'm really curious. Like I had heard somewhere that one of your goals growing up was to be on the Today Show. And I grew up like with a fascination for that show too. Like my mom always had it on in the background, but GMA now has been number one for, I think it's like the last 8 years. You guys have been the number one morning show. Like, what do you think is the special sauce, so to speak, and what makes GMA so special and just makes it resonate with so many people now?
Well, that's the thing, is I think you can get news everywhere, right? You can.
Sure.
I mean, you can get news however you want it, wherever you want it. And that can be overwhelming and confusing for people. I think that what we do, and our producers, do a pretty good job every day, is saying what matters most, what do people need to know, and how can we tell them that still in an entertaining fashion. And I think that's what we're doing. We choose people and places and things that hopefully impact everybody. I mean, I think about my mom in Michigan a lot. I think about my grandma outside of Chicago. Anywhere that's not New York and LA. And I don't think we succeed in this every day, but I think that we do tell a story for a large audience that, at the end is still entertaining and is still fascinating for everyone. I think there should be more weather, but that's me. But yeah, no, I think, and then the people, you can't go wrong when you have someone as generous and as genuinely caring as Robin. And I don't think that the people at the Today Show are terribly mean or,
Sure.
Everybody has special people, but I think that ours are extra special. I think that Robin's extra special. I think that George is extra special. And I think Michael is too. Yeah. And I like to think that all of that matters, either on an individual level. Like I don't, especially now, but even when I was in the studio, I didn't get a lot of chance to interact with them. I don't have time. That's why me being in my basement actually doesn't look any different than when I was in the studio. But you can tell from behind a person's eyes when you watch television what their intent is. You can tell how much they genuinely know about the subject matter that they're in. And I think that we do have the best people for that. So whether that works, and people will always say, "Oh, it's chemistry." I'm like, I think it is, but it comes from a genuine care from behind the eyes, is what I would say.
Well, there's a culture too. I feel like that, the people on the show rotate and change throughout the years, and one person leaves, another one comes in, or you add a new person or whatever. And part of it is just the culture that's created there. And, everybody has to buy into that and be a part of it. And you bring somebody new in, they assimilate to that as well, right? And it seems like Robin and George in particular are kind of leading that charge, right? And just their generosity and sort of, I don't know, that's how it feels from a viewer standpoint anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're reading that correctly, in that I think they both are the utmost professionals. So they lead in that way and show you. I always say they show you with grace and like how to do things. And if I ever have a question, I know I can go. I usually go straight to Robin and I ask her, and I don't feel that there's a wall up that doesn't allow for that. And I think that's what the viewer feels too.
Definitely. I want to ask too about, you have this show Hearts of Heroes that's on Saturdays on ABC, part of Litton's Weekend Adventure. You're already so busy as, an author, a meteorologist. Like, what drew you to that show? What makes you want to sort of share these stories about, people who rescue others and help restore and rebuild their lives?
Well, ever since I left Hurricane Katrina, which was my first big storm to cover, which is quite a boot camp of telling stories in a storm, I was there for a week. I was in a van with just my photographer, sleeping in the van, no toilets, no anything.
Yeah.
And I would look at these people who came in who were the heroes. And I felt even then that I didn't get to cover them as much as I would have wanted. Fast forward 15 years, and I have done hundreds of storms, floods, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes. Doesn't matter what the natural disaster is. I've watched these people go in, do their job seamlessly. A lot of times, even in tornadoes, when I'm storm chasing, I'd be right there, and I'd get to see that true first responder, watch that happen. And I'm always in awe, but they don't have time to talk right then, nor would I be interrupting them. But I thought, what a great show idea to be able to hear, when it's appropriate later, from the hero, from the person who you never get to talk to because they're too busy working, not only about that storm, but what we can do to make things better for them in the future, and they deserve it. You think about this, about bravery and about service. And these are the people who are doing it day in, day out, especially during a pandemic. House fire, doesn't stop. House fires don't stop. Wildfires don't stop. And so I think that even now, even more, it is such a special show to be able to highlight these people, let them talk, let them tell us what it felt like from their point of view, and then honor them. And that I could not say no to a show like that. It also, a lot of times if I'm there for a week, I leave and I have like storm pen pals, like in Hurricane Michael. I had people who I still write often.
Oh, wow.
We keep in touch. And I think that it allows the story to be a reminder in people's heads. It doesn't just go away. A storm like Katrina or Florence or Michael, these people will be hurting forever from it. It'll change and alter what the landscape of not just their land looks like, but their psyche, their lives. If they lost people, if they got injured, you don't think about all of those things a year, 2, 5, 10 years later, but they'd never end. And even just to get a mailbox after something like Storm Surge and Hurricane Michael, to get mailboxes back up, to think the gratitude that you have for the mail to be able to come to your door again. Those are the things I think that this show can and already does, but will even more in the future be able to showcase and remind people.
It's resiliency, I guess, right? These people are...
Yes, and that's what I think the show shows.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Shifting gears for a minute to kind of happier stuff. Part of what I love about your job and what I think I would like about it is you've sort of become one of the de facto Disney parks correspondents for ABC. Like, they send you down to different openings at Toy Story Land, or, you get to go around the world to a bunch of Disney parks for the last several years. But I saw on Instagram recently that there was a picture of you, your brother, and your stepmom with Dale and Goofy from, it looked like the early 90s. Like, I'm a big Disney Parks fan. Like, what are some of your earliest memories of going to the parks?
Oh my gosh. We were lucky enough to have, my grandmother lived in Deerfield, Florida, so South Florida, and my other side, my aunt lived in Coral Springs, which is also Fort Lauderdale. But so we would go to Florida almost every year. My dad would get us in the car. We would drive the 24 hours, which is wild to me. Like, why did we do that? I guess it was money, but my goodness.
Was it nonstop, like just rotating drivers and just?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. No, just not even rotating drivers. Just my dad would do it.
He'd just do it.
My parents were divorced.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is before my stepmom. Then my stepmom came in, so yes, she would rotate in. But
gotcha.
We would drive all the way down, and a lot of times we could convince them, like, let's just do one day. in Orlando one day, you know? And so that was a way that we got to see Disney or any of the parks more often than I think most kids would have, because we always had that annual trip to go see our family. And boy, I have such positive, I feel like everything happens there. I feel like I kind of got to stamp my life almost every year by making that trip. And it meant a lot for us to be able to have that time with our family, to be able to, you know, live out our Disney dreams, because that's what you really do when you're there. And so to then get a job working for Disney through ABC, and then to have them say, hey, would you want to cover this? I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And fortunately, I work with a producer, a meteorologist, Samantha, she is the concierge of Disney. She's like the adult that loves Disney, you know what I'm saying? Like to that weird level, but like, it's okay. Because when we go, she knows how everything works. She's next level, and I've loved enjoying it with her and then bringing the kids in. So it's been a really fun, and just doing the new openings. I mean, Star Wars, to be able to be there and feel that after the kids and we all had like caught up on all the Star Wars, it felt so otherworldly. And then to Harrison Ford and to see everybody come out of, you know, the Millennium Falcon and do that big press thing. It didn't feel like a press thing. It felt like we were actually there watching like history be made in Star Wars. Right. It was very surreal, and I loved it.
Well, that's what I was curious about too, is sort of, you know, having to work some of these events. Like, does it lose any of the magic or any of the luster, you know, being behind the scenes or hearing some of these stories, or does it make you appreciate it more?
Oh, appreciate it so much more, and make me even more of a Disney nerd, because even thinking about, we did the around the world to all the Disney parks in a week. And that was, you know, that's the ultimate Disney fans, I'd say, goal. It would be to do that, maybe not in a week, because we did not have enough time at every park. But we started that journey in Anaheim. And so, of course, where it all started, we started. And to go up in the Matterhorn, which was the ride that always scared me, because we did California a couple of times when I was younger. We had cousins out there in LA and San Diego. So to be that ride always freaked me out, because I would hear that guy screaming through the park, and you'd be like, I don't know if I want to go on that when you were young. Yeah. And to be able to go through that Matterhorn and see all of the writings on the wall, like people have, you know, etched in there that have worked over the years, to see the basketball court that was put in for workers. That's like one of the old Disney myths that people have proven is true.
And to really see it, and to know it's there.
And to really see it, and to stick my head out of the Matterhorn with Mickey Mouse, look over Walt Disney's original dream, and then to know that I was about to embark on a trip to all that had come after. If that's not inspiration, I don't know what it is. You know, like you could talk a billion times over about what Walt Disney believed and the sayings that and the quotes that come from him that mean a lot. But I really felt that up there. I felt like this guy thought about the strangest concept. You come to somebody and say, I want to create a park where people come in and all these characters. It's weird. It's strange, you know, but he did it. And he dreamed and he dreamed and he dreamed. And my mom used to say that to us growing up all the time. If you dream it, you can believe it. The world will believe it. You know, just to go on that, you need somebody to inspire you that way. And you need someone to support you so that it really can happen, because there is something to that. And going back to the Today Show, that's what I based my dreams on, was like, okay, I see something that I want. I put it in my passwords every day. I put in Today Show 10, Today Show 10, because by 2010, I wanted to be at the Today Show. Granted, I did like a weekend stint there, and then they decided they didn't want a weekend person. And I was like, okay. So ABC opened up, and look at what it's been able to do. And it kind of brought me roundabout back to Disney, you know? So it means more than it probably even looks like at the surface, or more than I even think about. So thank you for letting me think about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm happy you got a chance to share that. And you know, one other thing I'm thinking about too, just you talked about inspiration there. You've been very open, you know, you wrote your book Natural Disaster, and have been very open about some of your own struggles, eating disorders, depression, things like that. One of the things that, like, just thinking about sort of how you don't realize an impact that you have, like I told my sister that I was going to interview you, and I didn't even know if she had a concept of like who you were or anything. And she wrote me back and she said, oh, that's great. She actually has narcolepsy too. My sister has narcolepsy. And she said, you know, I was watching Ginger when I was pregnant, because I was just so nervous about being off my meds during that time, and like not knowing if I could handle it, and knowing that Ginger had narcolepsy and shared that. and was able to have 2 kids, like that gave me all the confidence. I was like, oh, wow, like, can I share that with her?
Wow.
And she was happy for that. But just like as a public figure, it must be scary to open up that personally to people, right?
You know what? That first time of doing it in the book, I mean, I had certainly said things publicly before, but I really hadn't had an opportunity to allow people to get me to know me better. You know, they can't get to know you in the 30 seconds that you have on TV. So they have this image. And I had always yearned to allow that, you know, complex relationship to develop a little, that should develop between people who trust someone about what their, you know, information is coming from them and who they are. But that night before my book went to print, I woke up in the middle of the night and I said to my husband, I can't do this. This is going to ruin me. Oh my gosh, people are going to know. They're going to know. Why am I doing this? You know, and I had a real genuine freak out. And he said to me, if you don't rattle someone, if someone doesn't like you after this because of what you say, then you will not help the 99% of the others who are going to be so happy with this. And he was so right in saying that, because I had gone into that book saying, I am not going to wear a pastel sweater and sit on the cover and just be a nice girl that they know from. That's not a book.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything. And I'm too, it's a memoir is a weird word anyway, like just a memoir with nothing in it that has no relevance. Like, it had to shake, and it had to do, and it didn't even shake as much. I mean, it was combed over 9 times by lawyers. So believe me, it's much dirtier and much worse.
Yeah.
But what stood out and what came out of that were the stories that mattered the most, and the ones that have now I see how much they've helped other people. I have countless emails. I'm telling you, I still get them. I still get direct messages, and they go all the way to, you saved my life. And I'm like, what? No way. And I get those because, you know, I think always of this one story, a mother who had 3 children. She said, I had no idea who you were. I've never seen you on TV, but I've been struggling. So one of my friends gave me your book. And she said, I read the first line in the intro. I read the rest of the intro. And then I checked myself into a hospital because you had. And she said, I was going to take my life. I would have taken my life from my children, from my husband. But because you said it's okay to go to the hospital, I went. And I was like, wow, okay, that's what this book is for. And it was really healing in the part I didn't anticipate for myself. I had no idea how much it would mean for me to finally stand up, and not just in my personal life, but in my public life, say, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, I guess I don't care. Yeah. And that power in knowing who you are and that honesty with yourself and with others is the most healing and surreal moment for me probably in my whole life, because then I realized how beneficial it was, not just to everybody else, but to myself, you know, so that I'm writing a second book because I know that there are parts of my story that I did not share, not even that were cut because they weren't even written in the first place, because I know what they can do for people now. And I'm hoping that I finally heal by saying them out loud.
Yeah. It's weird how that works, right? That like you're almost doing it for yourself, and then all these other. It's how I feel about this podcast. It's like, you know, it's a healing thing for me, but then other people take benefits from it, and you go, oh, well, okay, good. I'm glad I'm helping people. You know, it's wild how that works. Well, thank you for sharing all that too, and for, you know, just helping everybody. One last question, just getting back to GMA, and sort of what we talked about at the beginning of, you know, you got this great home studio set up now, but there is that camaraderie piece, and, you know, a lot of the team is back in Times Square. Like, how eager are you to get back there, or how, like, what do you feel like your timeline is on that? Do you know yet, or is it going to be just kind of a judgment call?
I feel so grateful, number one, that I have a workplace that allowed me to do this, to keep other people safe, to get my family safe. Nobody knows, I don't think. I think we're all in a state of kind of, I don't know. I know that we will stay here as long as we possibly can to know that it will make everyone at work safe and my family. Like, that's really the end of it. Sure. I'm not itching as much as I thought I would be, because I know the overall health and general well-being is the most important thing to me. So, like, I keep joking, I could stay in my basement forever. Probably not in my basement forever, but could I do this, and could I wake up and see my children wake up once? Yeah. I could keep doing this. You know, that part and that balance, if that's possible to do from here, I will do it as long as I possibly can, because I'm finding I am also super efficient. I find not to take, you know, the commute is long, can be long. Even when you're at work, you know how that goes. You're in a workplace, it's nice because you're social and you enjoy that time, but I can easily waste an hour after I get done chatting around, gossiping, doing my, like that's important for life. But like within that hour, I've written a whole segment for It's Not Too Late on ABC News Live. Like I get my head down here. I have my own little space and I'm in my like efficient and work pod. And I find it so helpful. So yeah, I'm good to stay as long as it will keep everybody healthy. And then the day that we have audience come back or that we can have guests on the show, that's when I should be back.
Yeah,
I think. And that feels like it's really far away.
All right, there we go. Ginger Z. Lots of stuff there, huh? I mean, I feel like I could have gone on twice as long. There's a lot to cover. And obviously you heard at the beginning, I had completely forgotten that she and her family had COVID. I remember hearing about it at the time now. Like, as she was saying it, I was like, oh yeah. But it's funny, like I do prepare for these interviews. I go back and do a fair amount of research on my guests and, write up some rough questions in advance and sort of know where I want to take the conversation. But for some reason, I had missed that data point. And when she said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's totally right. That's the first person that survived COVID that I've talked to on the show. And it's a reminder that, we're all pretty darn close to people that have had it. 1 or 2 degrees of separation is it. So stay healthy, keep wearing those masks, keep social distancing. All right, that's it for today's show. Thank you for joining me. I am at Heath Racela on Twitter and Instagram. Give me a follow, give me a shout. New show on Thursday. Subscribe so you make sure you're the first one to get it in your feed. I'll talk to you then. Have a great day. Stay safe.